Reddit downplays how bad divorce is. Because many Reddit users are young and unmarried, many of them see divorce as a great option when you're just not happy. There are some circumstances where divorce can be beneficial, like infidelity or abuse, but marriage is not a high school relationship. In addition, even if you aren't in love with your spouse anymore, divorce is devastating financially, emotionally, mentally. It's one of the worst things that can happen to a person. Your spouse can cheat on you, leave you for the affair partner, and you could still owe them money and lose your kids. A parent's divorce permanently damages kids and makes kids more likely to divorce later. When I say this, people assume I want some kind of tradcon Handmaid's Tale world, and I'm actually a woman, but that doesn't change my opinion on how devastating divorce is. People seem to think that before divorce was so easy to get, people were all miserable, but I disagree. I think most people worked through their shit and actually tried. As someone who has lived through a divorce, I can tell you that even though I am happier now, it was a very trying time. The unsure feelings that I was doing the right thing, the sense of impending doom and regret always nearby. It was fucking awful. Your opinion used to be popular. Back when my abusive mother divorced my father, mothers almost always got custody of the kids. She got custody of us. Instead of her targeting my father, she came after us. Divorce sometimes means that an abusive parent can abuse their kids without the non-abusive parent intervening. Some abusive mothers get custody of their kids using false accusations of sexual abuse. Some divorced fathers disappear, thus neglecting children in a fashion worse than had they died. Not even just divorce, there are many situations in r/relationship advice where they recommend breaking up, even though that seems like going way overboard. Please take it from a teenager whose parents have been divorced for as long as I can remember. Divorce is a very serious thing, and if you have kids it will affect them, no matter how hard you try to keep them out of it. Every single disagreement you have with your ex will come back on the kids somehow, even if you try to keep them out of it. Split homes and shared custody will make your kids' lives unstable, even if you try to make things as easy as possible for them. Divorce will hurt your kids no matter how easy you try to make it for them. So to follow this up, if you're somebody who's even considering having kids someday, please take marriage seriously. If you do end up having kids, it will make their lives so much easier. While a split home may be better than a broken family that's still together, by far the best thing is a healthy family, so please do everything you can to make sure you have a healthy marriage if you're going to have kids. I don't care what you do to yourself or what your partner does to themselves if there are no kids in the picture, but don't hurt a kid because you couldn't take yourself, your life, or your relationship seriously. There's probably a big overlap between relationship subreddits and /r/amith asshole, and that subreddit fucking blows fat cock. So yeah, not surprised. Taking relationship advice from total strangers after giving them a 100-word account of your marriage problems is where this problem starts. Prenups are needed. People seem to think that before divorce was so easy to get, people were all miserable, but I disagree. I think most people worked through their shit and actually tried. This is a bit of a complex topic, because there was a societal expectation for women to be obedient to their husbands even when their husbands were shitty, so on the surface it could seem like they were totally fine. Spousal abuse used to be practically the norm in much of the country. It was almost expected for couples to begin to just tolerate each other, well, really the wife tolerating the husband, and focus on their kids instead of each other. People genuinely were miserable, and the trend of hostage wives who wanted to leave, but couldn't, in the 1960s was one of the big reasons why divorce laws became a thing. IRL people deal with cheating, and other relationship problems. Sometimes they break up, but often they work through it. Reddit is a bit of a bubble with its break up with them solutions, which is typical of young people, until they age enough to realize nobody is perfect, and the grass is greenest where you water it. I had a family member, shortly after a 50K and wedding, if I had to guess, leave her husband because he cheated on her. He was a military man, and was away on tour, got drunk, banged a whore, and told her about it? It ain't right, but man, he could have not told her. It's one of those things where you ask what's the lesson. So she remarried another military guy, and then started cheating on him while he was away. Didn't tell him though, instead the D00D told him when he found out she was married. So like, what's the lesson here? You're human, humans fuck up, maybe try to fix shit before you throw it away. In my country there are no tax benefits for marriage compared to partnership, so guess who's not getting married? Both my parents have been married 5 times each. That's a fucked up way to raise children. I mean, no one should really take advice from Reddit. We are a generation that thinks it's easier to give up than try to fix the problem, so having most of the user base not see it as bad or downplaying it is something you would expect. People don't need to just try to deal with it if they're unhappy. We have therapy and all kinds of other great things. Life is short, do what makes you happy. Divorce is fucking hell. Never get married. You can be opposed to divorce in general without wanting it illegal. I'm not a tradcan politically, but I find that many aspects of traditional discipline work well on a personal level. Divorces suck for everyone. In real-life relationships it's not about being in love, and pure sexual fantasies. Real-life relationships are about trust and reliability. Is your spouse boring but you trust them with your life? Great. Trusting someone is way more important than being entertained. Personally, my divorce was the best thing to ever happen to me. It depends on who you are and how you want to look at it. Divorce is a fucking nuclear bomb in your life. My divorce is extremely amicable, we both care about each other a lot and there's no petty bickering or back and forth about the legalities, but it is still absolutely soul-crushing. It changes everything in your life, even if you don't expect it to. Divorce sucks, even when it leads to a brighter future. True, there is an invisible line. Divorce should never be the go-to solution off the bat. Every couple wade through the shit swamp eventually. However, coming from Asia where divorcing is extremely taboo and no matter what the fault is always put on the men, I want to offer another perspective. I've seen men in their 50s being depressed but not willing to divorce their abusive wives because of society's taboo. Ultimately, no one on the internet knows what is the true state of your personal relationship with your spouse. You really just have to figure out on your own if your relationship is worth salvaging. The only thing I could disagree on is that not every divorce permanently damages the kid, because no. My parents got divorced and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. A good marriage has never ended in divorce, thus divorce is actually a great thing in totality. That doesn't mean there are not negative components of a divorce, including all the ones you mentioned, but the total sum is net positive in most instances. As a child of divorce, I was 7. My mom moved several states away. I would strongly advocate anyone living unhappily in marriage to consider it. Was it stressful and harmful in some ways for me? Of course. But so was living with 2 parents who constantly argued and living in a place where the tension was palpable every single day. As an adult, I can recognize that their divorce was inevitable and ultimately the best possible solution of all those available. Sometimes we tend to believe that there are always good solutions, and that's just not true. There are just relatively better solutions than others. Divorce usually isn't a good solution outright, but it's often the absolute best given the circumstances. Far too often people stay in bad relationships b/c of the unknown future and the fact they assign their own identity to that of their marriage/relationship. We need to get past that, grow up and recognize that previously great relationships will often come to an end as we grow and change. It just is what it is. Divorce is an option, but it should be considered the last choice. It's funny because things that should definitely lead to divorce they will defend, and everything else, things that shouldn't or probably won't, they push for them to move on. Agreed. Obviously if there's abuse or cheating that's a different story, but people throw around the advice to divorce far too easily. My mom filed for divorce when I was 13 and in another state with no family at the time. After that I saw my dad cry for the first time. Mom won 80% custody, been living in apartments ever since. Moved 2 hours away from my dad, Now I have to drive my little sister that drive twice every weekend to see our dad. I always had a grudge in the back of my head wishing my mom had waited until we were adults so we could have helped or not been involved at all. I'm pretty sure I may be neurotic in some way socially because of everything. That's what I'm always telling people. The run at the first sign of conflict mentality is horrible to adopt. You're never gonna make any lasting connections. A good relationship is one with conflict that gets resolved. Bad relationships are relationships without conflicts or with never-ending conflicts. I feel like this isn't necessarily exclusive to Reddit though. In general, the younger generation have to make much less effort to get a relationship. It creates a laziness around maintaining them, which in turn leads to them taking someone for granted. It's a product of dating apps and social media glorifying and creating unrealistic relationship standards more than it is exclusive to Reddit. There's just a much higher concentration of it on Reddit. I always say, if you're gonna spend time asking for relationship advice on Reddit, make sure to take it with a grain of salt. Reddit downplays absolutely everything. Seriously, don't you just love r/relationships where almost every thread asking for advice is getting the same type of feedback constantly, which is, leave him, you need to leave her right now. Get a divorce, break up. LOL. Don't go into ADA and relationship advice and you will be okay. Me and my wife were arguing all the time, and when we weren't, we were on eggshells around each other. Seconds stopped happening altogether. She didn't want to go on dates with me or on adventures anymore. I kept trying, thinking I could fix something. One day while at training out of state, she and I had an argument over something stupid. At 4 a.m. I got the effect of the Fed Reserve raising interest backwards, and she didn't talk to me for 2 days. When she finally did, it was to ask for a divorce. It was expensive, but we had no kids, separate bank accounts, and easily divided big ticket items between us. It sucked bad for me for a year, but not worse than any of my previous breakups. The only shit part is I have to check divorced on paperwork, and when I say ex-wife I get weird looks from people. Oddly enough, she and I are friends now, and I recently went and pinned her wings on. She is military, and got to meet her new boyfriend. Sure, divorce sucks, man, but it is way better than spending 30 years with someone you slowly painfully grow to despise and live an embittered, stressful life. My new girlfriend is incredibly sweet and caring, and she and I get along amazingly.